Okay, I think we're ready to call the meeting to order. We should let them in.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Transportation Commission regular meeting of October 12 of 2022. And would you please call the roll?
Chair Lowing,
Present.
Vice Chair Suma,
Present.
Commissioner Chang. Here. Commissioner Heckman,
Present.
Commissioner Regdal,
Here.
Commissioner Ruparvar,
Present.
Commissioner Templeton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Good evening. Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held with the option to attend by teleconference or in person. Members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of public comment on that item. Speakers may address items that are not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting. Spoken comments via a computer or smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom app. To address the commission, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 916-4155-9499. When you wish to speak, click on Raise Hand. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 916-4155-9499. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so we know that you wish to speak. Thank you.
This being the beginning of the month, we have to do our resolution again, authorizing use of teleconferencing for PTC meetings. So could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Suma. Any comments, questions? If not, let's go to a vote, please.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Lowing,
Yes.
Commissioner Regdal,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruparvar,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. We now go to oral communications. And this is a section of the meeting where someone from the public, online or in person, can comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So do we have speaker cards internally?
I see one raised hand in Zoom.
Okay, one in Zoom. Go ahead and call on that speaker, please.
Giovanni Ottolini, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you. My name is Giovanni Ottolini, and I've been a carpenter since 1997. I'm a field rep for Carpenters Local 405, representing 7,000 skilled carpenters and apprentices in Santa Clara County. Tonight, I am kindly asking that the commissioners please consider implementing labor standards on all future proposed developments in Palo Alto. Labor standards should consist of paying area standard carpenter wages, healthcare coverage, and a commitment to hire local carpenters, including apprentices. Myself and tens of thousands of other members have benefited from a state-approved apprenticeship program, and our quality of life is better because of it. Apprenticeship programs give those without the opportunity to attend college the ability to acquire skills that will lead to good-paying jobs and are a proven escalator to the middle class and a shot at the American dream, all without incurring college debt. Now more than ever, before area standard carpenter wages are crucial to blue-collar families trying to keep their heads above water in the most expensive region in the nation. These hardworking men and women are facing 40-year record inflation compounded by unprecedented fuel costs. It simply costs these workers more of their hard-earned money to get to work than ever before. It is clearly documented that carpenter work has a high impact on the body, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics states that workers in construction occupations accounted for nearly half of all fatal occupational injuries, or 47.4%. With these facts, lack of healthcare coverage is simply unacceptable. When workers are provided with healthcare coverage, it extends their life expectancy and eliminates the financial drain on already cash-strapped local governments and municipalities. As we look to find ways to reduce our carbon footprint in everyday life, promoting local hire policies reduces drive times, which in turn reduces emissions, traffic, and the odds of being involved in a motor vehicle accident, and it gives workers more time with their families instead of commuting. Also, employing local residents keeps the money they earn in the local community as they do business within their city. I hope I've done an adequate job conveying the many advantages of implementing labor standards. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address the commission tonight regarding this important topic. Thank you for your consideration. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Medina, are there any other speakers?
No speaker cards, no raised hands.
Okay, then that concludes oral communications. From staff or commissioners, do we have any agenda changes, additions, or deletions?
No changes from staff.
Okay, then let's go ahead with the director's report.
Sure. In your packet, you'll see the next up Planning Commission meeting is on October 26th, where we have a PHZ at 660 University, a traffic safety report from the Office of Transportation, and 1700 Embarcadero, which is the Mercedes site and design application. Then coming up in November, we have a few items as well noted: comp plan implementation report, a zoning ordinance on heat pump water heaters and other equipment. And then we'll have a news flash joint meeting with the City Council on their Monday date of November 28th, a joint meeting with Council on the housing element. So this was just set up recently, and hoping that most or all planning commissioners can attend. Then on the 30th, we have a development agreement coming and a state legislation review. Followed by December with this development agreement for the Stanford University Medical Center. So as far as representation at council, in October, we don't need anyone next Monday because that had not gone to the Planning and Transportation Commission, but we do have a pre-screening you might want to follow at 2400 El Camino Real. And as well, the California Building Code adoption and local amendments. That's coming on Monday. And then Chair Lowing is the representative with Commissioner Rectal as the backup for a meeting on the 24th of October, where NVCAP is targeted to go, as well as the Parklet program discussion and direction. So that is of interest. And then in November, we have Carrie as rep with Brina as backup. That's when the CUP thresholds are coming, and a couple of other items that hadn't been to Planning Commission of interest. I thought I would check in on something, and that is for December, it's the same two, Ed and Keith, as for October. So it just seems like that's fairly quick turnaround for you to once again represent the Planning Commission. So it's, if you care to address that.
We can figure it out probably.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing it out.
Sure. So there's a couple items in December, 3 items that have been to the Planning Commission or will have by that point: the Mercedes, the Los Trencos open space home, and the ADU code changes. Thank you. That's all I have to report.
Transportation Department.
Sure. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Rafael Rios, Senior Engineer with Office of Transportation. Just a minor update on the Charleston Arrestadero Corridor project. You may have noticed over the weekend, they've paid, the contractors repaved kind of some remaining portions of Arrestadero and a little bit of Charleston. And so there will be temporary markings right now until the striping can get down. Hopefully in a week or two, the striping will be put down. We've received some questions from the public, and you might want to know too, like the median island at Clemo is not there right now. It's temporary. It is being moved slightly, so it will be replaced along with the median flashing beacon that was there previously. So they're just being located in better spots. So. And that's my only update from transportation.
Are you on target for that, for next meeting for the crossing issues?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure how much we should talk about it, but yeah, but we'll be presenting a report that was.
Just want to know if it's definitely on.
So yeah, for
Okay.
2 weeks from now.
Okay. Commissioner Chang.
Hi, I just had a quick question for you, Mr. Reese. So a member of the public asked me a question about the Charleston Arrestadero corridor when it was under construction. And they said they saw it scraped and then paved again, and then scraped a second time and paved again. And I didn't know if you knew what was going on or could even verify that that actually happened. Like, were there two different projects going on or?
There was a slight adjustment to that median islands, right? I know, like right at Lewis. It would have been right up against the travel lane, and actually there was a little error, so we made the contractors redo the island. That might have been could be possibly what you're referring to.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it was at that intersection. All right.
Yeah,
Great.
right by Montrose. The island was put down and then had to be replaced pretty quickly. So.
Thank you so much. I'm impressed that you knew what I was talking about.
Any other commissioner questions of staff? Okay. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you I didn't see your light. Go ahead, Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you. So among the public comments that we received in advance of this meeting, there was an October 1st letter from the president of the Pali PTSA asking for, as she described it, a seat at the table in the dialogue that's happening about the grade separation process. It's addressed to the council, not to us, but it's a transportation issue. So I thought it was appropriate for me first to just acknowledge that the city's received the letter, and to find out from, or just to confirm with staff that somebody at the staff level is going to reach out to Ms. Cornwall, who's the president, and have a dialogue about this. I don't know how it should come out because I don't know who else is at the table, but I do want to be responsive to the request.
Okay, I can share. I'm sure that email was sent to our department, and I'll make sure it gets to the appropriate staff and project manager in our department. I know we are, the school district has a seat at table. I'm not sure about the PTA or PTSA, to be honest. So, and I know we just received this, probably an email from a student group from Gunn. So we are trying to incorporate as much of that input from the state. They are considered stakeholders, and trying to gather as much input as possible. So I'll make sure that our project manager is aware. You said it was from Mrs. Cornwall?
Right, Sarah Cornwall, dated October 1st, addressed to Mayor Burton, the council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Templeton?
Thanks. Just following up on that, I was a member of the XCAP when we were discussing the different rail alternatives a couple of years ago, and the school district was literally invited to have a seat at the table at that time and declined. So it's really good that we're seeing some change here and some interest in getting involved. So just want to applaud that the PTA for stepping up to represent those voices. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any others. All right, we'll move to our single agenda item for tonight, which is not an action item. It's a study session. It's identified in page-long verbiage, and I will just call it 200 Portage and 3200 Park and 340 Portage. And this is a study session, and it's not the last time that the public will hear it. It's not the last time that we will hear it, and you'll hear explanations of that from staff. So Claire, do you want to make the presentation?
Yeah. Yes, hold on. I'm just trying to make sure my screen is shared properly. Hold on one second.
The project planner for this item is Claire Raybold, and she has been with the project for some time and will present.
Good evening, commissioners. Chair Lowing. I'm Claire Raybold, senior planner. So I just want to start this presentation by saying that I know there's a lot to unpack here. So the goal of this study session is just to provide an orientation for the commission and the public to familiarize you with the project and to provide some background of how we got here. This hearing also provides an opportunity to comment on the draft EIR and to and to provide some initial feedback on the development agreement terms. But comments on the draft EIR can be provided at any point during the public comment period. So we had a number of comments from members of the public leading up to this study session that the 45-day deadline for comment was not sufficient and requesting to extend it to 60 days. We've heard those comments and the city will provide that extension. So we will be accepting any comments on the draft EIR through November 15th now. I do also want to acknowledge that there are numerous addresses associated with this site. To date, the city has used the addresses listed on the application filing. So 200 Portage and 3200 Park Boulevard. That's the reason we use those addresses. But I want to acknowledge that this project does encompass 340 Portage, which is often the address that's used for the cannery building and maybe is more well known to the public. So with that, this visual is just intended to orient you with the project site. So the site is bounded by Olive Avenue, Park Boulevard, and Portage Avenue and Ash Street. And it encompasses the cannery building. The cannery building has warehouse uses and R&D uses currently, as well as 84,000 square feet of former retail space that was occupied by Fry's Electronics. This site also encompasses the Audi building at 3250 Park, which is across Matadero Creek from the site. And it also encompasses 3040 Park, which is a separate parcel, currently a small triangular parcel that includes a small commercial recreation use, a CrossFit type studio. So a little bit of background. The project site is located within the boundaries of the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. The work on the NVCAP began in 2018 and is still ongoing. As part of that process, we have received a significant amount of feedback on how the public and the property owner may want to see that site be redeveloped. So that feedback was used to identify the key objectives for the city and Sobrato as a starting point for negotiations for the ad hoc committee, which I'll go into more detail in a minute. Throughout 2021, there were numerous overlapping discussions going on around the site. Sobrato filed the 200 Portage Townhome Project, a 91 unit development in March of 2021. Which is a streamlined housing project under Senate Bill 330. Around the same time, Sobrato requested clarification from the city regarding interpretation of the code language that allows for retention of non-conforming uses on the property. Staff brought forth this code interpretation to council, who held hearings in June and October of 2021. In October 2021, the council stayed interpretation of the code and formed an ad hoc committee to explore shared redevelopment interest of the site. The ad hoc committee concluded in summer of this year, and council held the study session to present the work of the ad hoc committee and begin the public process for the development agreement and associated entitlements. Council directed staff to execute a tolling agreement, which allows for the townhome project to be placed on hold while the city completes the public process for the proposed development agreement. And that tolling agreement is available on the project webpage, available to the public. So that kind of brings us to where we are at today. On September 16th, the city released a draft EIR for the proposed project. And as I noted, it originally had a 45-day comment period, which we're now extending for 60 days to November 15th. This is one opportunity for comments, but any comments can be provided at any point during that process. And they can be emailed to me at claire.raybould@cityofpaloalto.org. And wanted to go into a brief summary on the environmental impact report. It evaluated the proposed 200 Avenue Townhome project, which is a 91 townhome unit development. It requires demolition of a portion of the California Register eligible building and assumes retention of everything else on the site as is. There would be no park space proposed as part of this project. The EIR also evaluates a no project alternative as required under CEQA. This doesn't meet any of the objectives of the proposed project. The existing buildings and uses on the site would remain under this alternative, and uses would continue to be governed by the city's non-conforming use regulations. Alternative 2 looked at the adaptive reuse of the cannery building. In this scenario, the cannery building would not be demolished, but the building would be reused for housing. We tried to align this alternative with council's preferred alternative in the NVCAP to the extent that it relates to this property. So it looked at doing a 3-level, adding another level onto the cannery building, and adaptive reuse of that whole building, again, for housing. And other existing uses would be retained. Under this alternative, there was also a 7,400 square foot area of retail space on the ground floor of that cannery building. Alternative 3 is the development agreement alternative. Under alternative 3, which is what we're going into a little bit more detail about tonight, a portion of the cannery building of 200 Portage would still be demolished, the same as the proposed project. It would increase the number of housing units from 91 units to 149 units. And it provides a dedicated parcel to the city of 3.25 acres for the affordable housing as well as a park. So the findings of the environmental impact report, the EIR identified a significant and unavoidable impact on historic resource identified for the proposed project and all of the build alternatives. Mitigation measures were identified to reduce impacts on other resources to a less than significant level. This includes biological resources, hazardous materials, noise, and specifically vibrations adjacent a historic building, traffic and transportation, and tribal cultural resources. Wanted to provide also a brief overview of the development agreement that's being presented tonight as well. The proposed development agreement includes the following entitlements and legislative actions. It would include a development agreement itself, the comprehensive plan amendment, planned community rezoning for all of the parcels, a tentative map followed by a final map, as well as historical resources board review. And I just want to note that there is architectural review, but that's part of the planned community process. Staff anticipates that there would be additional study sessions and hearings in front of boards, commission, and council. And I do want to make it clear, because there was some confusion amongst the public. The development agreement alternative does not have a hearing limitation. It is not subject to the same regulations under the Housing Accountability Act as the townhome development, because it includes, rezoning and other legislative actions. So this kind of is just a quick summary of some of the key objectives for the city, and then for Sobrato. Mainly Sobrato is looking to retain a lot of their research and development and office uses at the site. The city is looking to provide housing. There was a lot of interest in the park and potential naturalization of Matadero Creek in that area. We were looking for a retail, a community space, meaningful bicycle and pedestrian connections, and other such items. So, the negotiated terms of the agreement, a quick summary of these include the construction of a parking garage behind the cannery building in order to remove the parking from the land to be dedicated to the city in order to accommodate the park. It includes dedication of 3.25 acres for the purposes of the park and affordable housing. It includes $5 million towards the improvements of the park and affordable housing. It includes 74 ownership townhome, market rate townhomes. And it does allow for the retention of the existing R&D use at the cannery building, as well as the office space on Ash Street. The Audi building would also be converted from an auto repair service to R&D space. And this just provides a quick overview. The orange shows where the townhomes would be proposed. The light pink shows the location of the parking garage. The purple shows the area of the R&D uses. In green, obviously, would be the park area, and in blue is roughly the location of the affordable housing project of up to 75 units. And then there's a small retail area identified in red, 2,600 square feet. So, some of the things that, will be involved in this process include a comprehensive plan amendment. So the existing land use designation is multifamily residential for this property. So as part of this process, it would necessarily require a land use map amendment to allow for the retention of the commercial uses. There are a few options of how we might be able to explore that. The applicant has proposed to designate the cannery building parcel, the Audi building parcel, and the Ash building parcels as a mixed use designation, which would be possible if you're looking at the site as a whole and considering it a mixed use as part of the whole development agreement. The other alternative would be to designate the Audi and the Ash parcels as service commercial, which is consistent with a lot of the other zoning around this area, or sorry, a lot of the other land use designation around this area. The cannery building would, because of the dedication of a portion of the parcel to the city, the cannery building exceeds the floor area ratio that's currently allowed under service commercial. The comprehensive plan indicates that it allows floor area ratios up to 0.4. So if we wanted to explore that, then a text amendment would be required to add the word generally to that designation. So we're interested in getting some feedback tonight or in future hearings from the Planning Commission about this, about the comprehensive plan amendment. Planned community rezoning. The project is going to include merging and subdividing existing parcels to create 5 new parcels. The DA alternative would include a planned community rezoning for each of these resulting parcels. And no physical improvements are proposed on 3 of the two of the remaining parcels. Parcel 2 would be dedicated to the city to allow for the future development of the affordable housing. And last but not least, just historic considerations. Page and Turnbull evaluated the project site and determined that the cannery building and office building at 3201 Ash Street are eligible for the California Register of Historic Resources under Criterion 1 events. 200 Portage Townhome Project and the development agreement alternative would require partial demolition of the cannery building, which is identified as a significant and unavoidable impact in the draft EIR for both alternatives, as I noted previously. And so with that, staff recommends that the Planning and Transportation Commission take the following actions. Conduct a study session to consider the draft environmental impact report for the proposed 200 Portage Avenue Townhome project and the development agreement project evaluated as alternative 3. And review and provide comments on the proposed development agreement between the City of Palo Alto and the Sobrato organization. And with that, I'll turn it back to you and recommend that you hear from the applicant.
Is the applicant present?
They are present online.
Okay.
If you want to share your presentation, either Tim or Dave.
I believe Evan has the presentation.
Oh, perfect, thanks.
Good evening, Commission Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity for our team to present the proposed project to the Commission this evening. My name is Tim Steele. I'm the Senior Vice President of Real Estate Development at the Sobrato organization. And in respect to our allocated time, I will quickly walk through a brief outline of events and salient project points. And then our residential architect, David Burton from KTGY, will quickly introduce the townhome project, and Evan Sokolsky from ArcTech will do the same for the commercial portion. We also want to compliment Claire on her well-written and comprehensive staff report, considering the complexities that are included in this proposal. So starting with that, we can move to the next. Sobrato purchased the subject property in 2010. And with the Fry's lease expiration imminent, we immediately started discussions regarding this property and its future with the city staff and continue to discuss over the next 10 years. We were approached by staff during the completion of the comp plan update, asking if we would consider providing matching funds for a city application for an MTC Planning Grant to support the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan process, which we agreed to do and supported that with $250,000 to support the EIR work. The MTC grant was approved in 2018, and we participated as an active member of the MVCAP working group, which kicked off in October of 18. And we were very interested in hearing from the working group and the community. The working group met 17 times plus 2 community meeting workshops. The MVCAP working group identified 3 alternatives with no major consensus for one recommendation or priority. The city contracted for a historic evaluation, as Claire pointed out, for the cannery building by Page and Turnbull, which was presented to the Historic Resource Board in July of 2019. The Planning and Transportation Commission met 4 times during the MVCAP process, with the last being March of 21, in which they recommended to the City Council alternate 3B, which is represented on the left of your screen. Council met 4 times, with the last being January of 22, and supported 3B with some minor adjustments. The ad hoc meetings used the MVCAP work product, the PTC alternate 3B recommendation, and City Council discussion points as a guidepost in our discussions. The ad hoc development agreement proposal is similar in many ways to the MVCAP working group discussions, the PTC recommendation, and the City Council recommendation is 3B. 3B expresses a strong interest in parkland and the possible restoration of Matadora Creek. The proposed plan dedicates 2.25 acres of land for parks, including fee title to Matadora Creek as it runs through the site, to facilitate its potential naturalization and for park uses. The 74 townhomes park land dedication requirement under the city's ordinance is 0.62 acres. The DA provides for 3.25 times the required amount. In addition to the land dedication, the DA provides a $5 million contribution to the city, which has the discretion to use it towards creek restoration, park improvements, and/or affordable housing. The proposed 74 townhomes would be required to provide for 15% of the units as affordable, which would have been 11 units. However, the DA provides dedication of approximately 1 acre of land to the city that has the potential to provide for 75 to 100 or more affordable housing units. As mentioned earlier, the DA provides the $5 million to the city, which can be used for affordable housing and/or park improvements at its discretion. Similar to alternate 3B, the project proposes the removal of square footage of the cannery building associated with the prior Fry's retail store. Within the remaining cannery building, a 2,600 square foot retail space will be provided with additional outdoor seating. Also similar to 3B, the remaining cannery building will continue to provide R&D space for the existing R&D tenants with no new R&D square footage or space proposed. The remaining cannery building will be refurbished following the Secretary of Interior's historic guidelines. There will be historic documentation done following the Secretary of Interior's historic guidelines that will include a public display within the new retail space. The refurbished cannery building space is planned to be net zero, with 100% of its energy being generated on site. As identified in the NVCAP process as a priority, the project provides for an access easement to facilitate the enhancement of pedestrian and bicycle connections between Park Avenue and Portage through the site. Finally, the project voluntarily proposes a TDM plan with a 15% trip reduction goal. In closing, we feel that the ad hoc discussions in the city and Sobrato's approach to using the NVCAP process, the PTC recommended alternate 3B, and the city council comments as a guidepost is clearly reflected in the proposed development agreement before you tonight. With that, David, please, if you would continue.
Thanks, Tim. As Tim said, my name is David Burton. I'm an executive director with KTGY, and we're the architects that have been working with the Sobrato organization on the design of the residential portion of the site. This residential portion encompasses 74 townhomes located on a parcel between Park Boulevard and the R&D building at the center of the site. The site is arranged in 4 rows of buildings, stepped back from Park Boulevard. We have given each townhouse a front door onto either a street or our central landscape paseo. Where the ends of the buildings face the streets entering off of Park Boulevard, we've placed front doors facing these streets also to ensure attractive and activated facades on all street frontages. We want these homes to engage with the street and to provide a friendly and human-scaled face to the public. The buildings are maintained in as short a lengths as possible in order to make the site as pedestrian-friendly as possible. The site is arranged with a fine-grained network of sidewalks to encourage and facilitate walkability. In our central paseos, there are widened paved areas that provide places for meeting and talking with one's neighbors to encourage close community connections. Next slide. Our intention with the massing and the architecture of these buildings is A, to establish a strong rhythm of bays to highlight individual townhouses and give the buildings a strong identity. B, to mediate between the scale of the commercial buildings along Park Boulevard and the existing warehouse building at the heart of the site, as well as the nearby single-family residences. And C, to remain compliant with the 35-foot height limit that's set in the zoning for the site. There are 3 distinct color schemes for these buildings. The colors and the details have been developed to respond to the surrounding context. The building you see in the foreground in this rendering has a brick base and earthier tones, which are meant to play off the brick and other materials of the WeWork building that sits directly across the street on Park Boulevard. The building at the far end of the rendering, which you can't see too much here, but certainly outlined in the packets that were provided to you, has a series of darker tones primarily chosen to maximize differences with this and our other color scheme to create a more varied street scene along Park Boulevard, as you can see here as buildings go down the street. Next slide. And then this is our third color scheme, which has a material and color palette that's intended to pick up on the design of the buildings previously approved by the city for the Mike's Bike site along El Camino Real at the opposite end of the site. In this color scheme, as well as the others that we've developed, we selected darker window frames, some metal roofing details, and colorful front doors that pick up on some of the materials and the colors that are being used on the restored warehouse building that has been talked about previously. Our goal in the design of these townhouses has been to create a simple, clear site plan that encourages walkability and an architecture that uses bold rhythms and warm color palettes to make a community that has a clarity in its design, relates well to its neighbors, and has good human scale. We hope that you'll agree with our choices and deem that we've achieved our goal. And now I'll hand it off, I think, to Tim, or Evan, I'm sorry. Not sorry, Tim.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Evan Sokolowski with ArcTech. I get a chance to speak to the R&D office portion of the project, and Claire already did a great job of hitting a lot of the points, so I'll try and go through this quickly to get to your questions and comments. But the R&D portion is the rehabilitation of the cannery building, which we know is an important building in the city, and it includes 380 and 340 portage portions of the building at approximately 142,000 square feet of R&D office space. In order to allow for the construction of the townhomes as well as the park dedication that both Claire and Tim mentioned, we are building a low profile parking garage in the backside of the project to accommodate our parking. We were very careful in the layout and design of that to minimize the scale of it in relation to the project and the adjacent residential neighbors. When we developed the cannery, our vision of the cannery building with city input, we also incorporated recommendations from the guidelines we received from the historical consultant. And that was an important piece to our project. And as you can see, the cannery building is on the south side of the project, adjacent to the townhomes that David spoke of and the park that is across on the south. So the parking garage is located to the north with the building. We do have the connection between the parking garage for amenity space. And as Tim mentioned, along on the northeast corner in conjunction with the city, we developed the retail portion of that. As we began the project, we were able to find this historic photo, which is from approximately the 1940s during our research. So it reflects the original, some of the original design of the cannery building. And as you'll see from the renderings as we move forward, we've incorporated many of the elements in the design and rehabilitation of the building. This is a view looking south at the main entry of the office R&D portion of the building. You can see the little key on the right side highlighting where that's coming from, as well as the historic photo down below. We think this gives a good idea of some of the details that we've been able to include and incorporate into the design, including the very prominent monitor windows up at the top of the monitor roof, and the windows along the north side of the project that were actually covered and enclosed when the building was expanded previously. Moving around to the other side of the site, this is one of the important features we wanted to include, which is the retail portion of the project. We are including 2,600 square feet of retail in working with the city and staff. We felt that was important. And beyond that, you can see from this rendering, we're developing a little plaza to allow for the connection indoor-outdoor space of the retail space itself. This is a view of that plaza, which you can see it gives us the ability to have some seating, varied seating around, as well as access into that retail space. And one of the other features we felt was important to incorporate both from an exterior and an interior perspective is really highlighting some of the materials and details that we have on our building. So jumping back one slide, the detailing utilizing the corrugated metal for the cladding of the building, which was a traditional material and a material that you could see in the historic photo. And even from this slide, you can begin to see into the very dramatic wood trusses that frame this interior space of our project. And in the development with city and staff on the retail space, we actually further developed the project and incorporated a skylight inside the retail space. And you can see that in the key plan on the lower right, with the ability to actually go into the retail, looking up through the skylight and really get a connection to this gorgeous historic building and the wood trusses that we are refurbishing during the construction. So giving a sense of one of the other elements that we felt was important was the incorporation of indoor-outdoor space and highlighting and minimizing the impact of the garage. So these are all views from the north side of the building, and you can see on the right is a view of the indoor-outdoor space adjacent to the garage and the building, the main entry, as well as some of the detailing that we've incorporated to pick up on the traditional detailing and the historic details with input that we received from the consultant. So overall, we are really excited about moving forward with this project and getting your input. We feel that it breathes new life into an underutilized building that we know is an important part of the city. So we're excited to be working with you on that. And at that, we will open to questions and comments.
Okay, thank you very much. I do want to get to public comment, but I'd like to give the commissioners an opportunity if they want to ask any procedural questions or super technical questions. One, Claire, I don't think we mentioned is the point on packet page 19 that we do not have purview over historic review.
My apologies. Yes, the staff report did note that the Planning Commission has purview over historic review, which is not accurate. So that is only subject to the Historic Resources Board. So
great. Want to clarify that?
Who would make a recommendation to council?
I'm sorry?
Who would recommend to council?
Yeah. Okay, so let's see if there's any clarifying question. Commissioner Heckman?
So I do have some technical questions, but really I want to talk right now mostly about process and what we can hope to achieve tonight and what opportunities we might have after tonight to achieve more. So we have received very recently this dense draft environmental impact report, an extensive plan set, and then this morning development agreement. And I don't know about my fellow commissioners, but there have not been enough hours for me to thoroughly review these documents to the extent I would need to if this is going to be my only opportunity to provide comment on them. And so I was hoping we could have a dialogue first to understand, is this coming back to us where there's an opportunity for us to provide more detailed comments because we will have had more opportunity to review these things. And we just heard staff tell us in the staff report that the CEQA review period for the draft environmental impact report has been extended by staff from 45 to 60 days, which I applaud. I saw a couple of requests for that, and obviously full information and adequate time is appropriate, but it raises the question of if this is coming back to us, is it going to come back to us inside of the draft environmental impact report comment period? And if so, then I know we have some people in the audience and a few attendees tonight. And if they comment tonight and there's not new information, there's just these documents that we need to come back and talk about, are they going to be allowed to come back and talk a second time, or are they here tonight because they're thinking it's their only chance? And so maybe they're not even ready to speak or as ready as they'd like to be, but they feel they have to because they might not get another chance. And so I think all of this stuff, if we can kind of figure out a plan in advance.
We have a plan.
Right?
We have a
So it's a comprehensive issue I'm raising.
Yeah, we have a plan. I was just going to do that after public comment, but we are going to see this multiple times. I'm going to ask Assistant Attorney Yang to speak to that in terms of the timing of these things. And I would fully intend to reopen public comment at the next meeting as well. So this is not the last time. In fact, if somebody decides that they would rather wait instead of speak tonight, that would be fine. And I think that our comments tonight are going to be as long as we want, but completely preliminary and in inquiry kind of basis. So agenda wise, we can hear public comment and we can make preliminary comments. Again, it can go as long as we need to, but that's not the last time for either one. And could we get Mr. Yang to speak to it?
Sure. So I guess I'll just say the purpose of this meeting tonight is just to introduce the project to the PTC and also to provide a public meeting where members of the public can speak to the draft EIR if they want to make oral comments. Of course, the comment period is going to be open for more than a month from today, and everyone has the opportunity to also submit written comments as well. But this is a study session. We're not asking for any direction, and in fact, most of the decisions, the recommendations that are going to be asked of the Planning Commission, those documents aren't ready or before you. We need to have Planning Commission recommendation on the planned community zoning ordinances, on the tentative map, on the comprehensive plan amendment. So we're going to be preparing the documents for those and bringing those back likely at the end of November or the beginning of December for a first look. And then we're also planning an additional PTC hearing in January of 2023, for just a second hearing on all of those things. So this is really just sort of the introductory, let's orient ourselves on this project meeting. This is also, we were trying to find an evening meeting where we could have an opportunity for in-person comment on the draft EIR.
Could you specifically address whether the PTC will see the DEIR before November 15th?
We're not anticipating, we're not planning at this time to have, another hearing on the draft EIR. There isn't any, the PTC doesn't have a formal role with respect to a draft EIR. We selected this meeting because it happens in the evening and it was scheduled during the comment period. And when initially, when we were thinking the comment period would be ending on October 31st, we didn't want to wait until the 26th to have that public meeting.
Okay, so any comments after tonight on the DEIR should just go to staff rather than anticipate a second meeting at which we would all discuss it.
Right, and that's how the majority of comments on a draft DIR usually come in through in writing. And even comments from members of the PTC tonight, we're not expecting any sort of uniform or consensus feedback from the PTC as a body. It's really, this is also an opportunity just for individual members, if they want to speak, orally to the draft EIR, to do so.
Right, and just for the public that's listening, that's completely different than the EIR compared to the draft EIR, because we'll be looking at that later, right?
Yes, I'm not sure if, I think we will plan to have the final EIR available before the PTC is asked to make final recommendations. And in that circumstance, the PTC is asked to consider the EIR as part of its recommendation on each of the various pieces.
Okay. Did you have any feedback, Commissioner Heckman?
I do, actually. I'm a little bit concerned with what I'm hearing in this process. As I'm understanding, the plan is the comment period is now going to end on November 15th. And so what I'm hearing is the only opportunity, not only members of the public, but even the PTC will have to make an oral comment is tonight. And so that if I, not as an individual, but as a member of the PTC, want to make a comment in the future, but before November 15th, my only way to do that is to write a letter. I don't think I've written a letter as a member of the PTC commenting on a city project. Well, I just haven't done it. It seems odd to me. And so I'm wondering if it would be, and again, I realize that members of the public can write letters, and many do. Some members of the public prefer to speak orally. They're more comfortable and feel that their comments mean something when they stand in front of the body and speak them. And I want to give that opportunity. So I'm wondering if we need to have this back on our agenda before November 15th, where the PTC can comment on the draft EIR, because I don't believe there is an analogous comment period on the final EIR or the EIR. I don't think that happens unless it's recirculated, which is a complicated issue, and I hope doesn't happen to this one. But anyway, so that's the thought I have, is that maybe we should be scheduling more time so that we can comment on this, and members of the public who aren't adequately prepared tonight can be adequately prepared and have more advance warning and chime in at that point.
Commissioner Rubenbar?
Thank you. I actually had a question regarding the interplay for staff between SB 330 and the development agreement. So is this is not an SB 330 application that was told, and now we're dealing with a negotiated development agreement. And then that means we have different, we have greater discretion than we would have had if it was SB 330. Is that accurate? Or can you please explain?
Yeah,
that is accurate. Yes. Yes,
Okay.
That's accurate. So the townhome development project, they filed a pre-application in accordance with Senate Bill 330. It's a majority housing project, 2/3 housing, with the 91 townhome units. And so it is streamlined and subject to only objective standards that were in place at the time that the SB 330 pre-application was filed. The development agreement includes legislative actions, including a comprehensive plan, land use map amendment, rezoning of portions of the site, and then the development agreement itself. And it encompasses commercial as well as residential uses. And so it is not streamlined under SB 330. And there is a process that we would be following in accordance with the development agreement requirements and the plan community rezoning requirements.
Okay. And then we go forward, with this negotiated development agreement. But if for some reason, like Sobrato, the applicant, is not into it, or the city, or we get entangled in something, then it's possible that this process could end and that SB 330 application can continue. I just want to know how it's all okay. Okay. Thank you. I just want to understand how it worked procedurally.
So
Go ahead.
Just to return to Commissioner Heckman's comments. So if I'm hearing you correctly, is your intent then to provide a formal recommendation from the PTC as comments on the EIR? versus individual commissioners?
Well, it's a study session. So
Okay.
what would normally happen in a study session is we provide our comments as individuals. Sometimes often what we find is there seems to be consensus in those individual comments, which gives direction and helps the staff. This is informal. There is no formal motion in the study session. It's just feedback, but it's feedback from the Planning Commission that can help staff or help guide staff in the direction that there seems to be consensus. Sometimes it's an individual commissioner who speaks, but yeah. So the idea is to give us an opportunity to provide feedback in the context of one of these meetings rather than individually write letters. And just to take one step further on that to sort of flesh out my vision. Right now, looks like we got a pretty full schedule on October 26th. Our next meeting is on November 9th, which happens to be the day after an election. And I was pondering whether, given the constitution of the commission, whether that meeting might be best moved to 1 week later, Wednesday night, the 16th, if that's possible. And if so, can we extend the comment period to the end of the day on the 16th instead of the 15th? So we basically can get public comment in at the end of the comment period without having to have a meeting on November 9th to do that. So that's the full thrust of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me go ahead and get the other comments. That certainly is a part of the process we'd have to look at. Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, I just had concerns along the same lines as Commissioner Heckman, so I'm not sure that I can say much that would add to it other than that I personally did not have time. And so I would very much like and hope that there'd be an opportunity to discuss the comments on the DEIR and the development agreement before the close of the DEIR public comment period.
Vice Chair Suma?
Thank you to my colleagues. And I would say that I share those concerns, and it's unfortunate that the development agreement was only made available to us today and to the public. And I'm perhaps someone can comment on that, but I do believe there's a 72-hour requirement. And I don't mind saying this because I'm sure we're all in the same boat. It was not possible to read and review 1,000 pages in the time we had. So, and it's a big deal. I mean, I want to make sure we give everybody a fair shake here and that we really are on our, giving our best feedback to staff and to the applicant, to be fair. So I'm pretty concerned about it too.
Commissioner Rectal?
Just to echo the concern, this was dumped on us on late last week. And when you have something that's 1,000 pages, is there any way that we can get a lead, extend that delivery and not have a full packet necessarily delivered early, but have some of the content delivered early just to make it more feasible for us to dig through it? I mean, when was this draft EIR completed? Was it just completed recently, or was it?
September 16th is when it was released to the public.
Okay, so it'd been nice if we would have had it earlier. Then at least we could have started digging through that, even if other stuff wasn't ready. At least we get a lead start. So and I do have some specific questions about some of the details. Should I go through those, or do you want us to talk about process still?
Let's just stay on process, just since we're on the roll here. Yeah, when we finished up with the pre-meeting yesterday, I was under the understanding that we would see this again for more debate, exactly for the reasons that were just discussed, because it was well, actually just what Vice Chair Suma said in terms of not even seeing the development agreement and the thousands of pages, 1,000 pages. So I would concur that we should try to fit it in sort of ASAP, and it would have to either be before the 15th or we'd have to extend that deadline.
So you had mentioned the 16th. We have a housing element working meeting, or community meeting on the draft housing element on that night. So I don't think that that would be an appropriate night to.
Well, what about next week in terms of the urgency of the other items not next week, excuse me, the next meeting?
On the 26th,
Yes. It's the 660 and 1700 Embarcadero.
yeah. It's possible that the 660 University, it's a planned community, a planned housing, it's a housing project. And then the other one is the traffic safety that you've been asking for. And the Mercedes dealership. So
I guess I would say, we could probably find time to add this in on a future agenda. But if the purpose is, to provide the public and the commissioners a chance to comment with more time on the draft EIR, I don't anticipate that there would be any additional staff work. It would just be an opportunity to open up the public comment period, allow the public to make comments, allow the commissioners to make comments, and then those would be part of the record that the EIR consultant and the staff would review and respond to for the final EIR. I noted, Chair, that you mentioned the idea of debate. And I guess with respect to the draft EIR, that's not really something that staff is anticipating. The commission would debate any item of the draft EIR.
I retract the word.
Okay, yeah, we were just looking for item, for commissioner comments.
Yeah, I say debate just because I don't expect them all to be 100% in sync. So that's why I use that word. But what I'm trying to get to is why don't we just continue this after our discussion tonight to the 26th and just adjust those agenda items accordingly.
can we also hear from the public who are here to comment tonight?
Of course. No, we definitely are going to do that.
Thank you.
And we have some comments as well. I'm just saying at the end of that, instead of trying to make the 15th or the 14th or around the current announced new deadline, if we just moved it to the 26th, that might be the easiest way to do it.
Easier than the 9th, the November 9th, which is the day after the election.
Okay, great.
Which would give more time to people, but.
Yeah. So let's use that as our working assumption now. And I think that'll work. And then we can go back to other questions that people have. So back to Commissioner Rectal. Thanks for being on hold there for a minute.
Oh, it's fine. I had a couple of questions. One, the DEIR it evaluates the SB 330 project, which is the 91 townhomes. And now it's 74. Is this going to be updated for that, or what's?
It's 91 townhomes for the proposed 200 Portage townhome development. The development agreement alternative has 74 townhome units and would include the potential for, it's evaluated the potential so that we don't have to return and do the CEQA as the city if we do a 75 unit affordable housing development in the location that was identified near Matadero Creek.
Say that again. So
the alternative 3 development agreement alternative evaluates up to 149 units, which includes 74 townhome market rate units and 75 unit, presumably a single, building rental development.
So you're saying the draft EIR encompasses the current development?
The draft EIR evaluates the development agreement alternative is evaluated as alternative 3 in the draft EIR.
Okay. And so, but the 94 is mentioned in here. Is that a different alternative?
So one way, I guess I would explain it this way. We received the 91 townhome application last year, and we got started on an EIR for that project. And then in the months that followed, this development agreement alternative took shape. But we already had most of the work done on an EIR for the 91 townhome project. So, and when we looked at the two projects, there were a lot of similarities in terms of the various impacts. So we said, look, we started with, this EIR that was mostly complete for the 91 townhome project. And we evaluated the new development agreement project as an alternative. And so it's evaluated in terms of its differences from the 91 townhome project. They're both evaluated in the EIR, but it's the 91 townhomes are treated as the primary project, and then the development agreement is an alternative that's compared to that.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Second question is, why are we doing PC zoning? We're breaking this up into separate parcels. Why aren't those parcels just rezoned to some specific development standard?
So the reason is that the city is receiving 3.25 acres of the land on this parcel. And so that means that the remaining land is smaller for kind of the same building size, which means that, now those buildings aren't meeting things like FAR and lot coverage. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, PC zoning always seems such a kludge. If you have why wouldn't you just create a new zone that had a different FAR requirement that's consistent with what you want to build here, and then that's set, as opposed to having this kind of one-off zoning?
Well, we would be making that new zone, to reflect this specific project, and who knows if it would ever apply anywhere else in the city.
Okay.
With the PC, at least you understand, this is actually built specifically for a project that was negotiated.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Vice Chair Schuler?
So I have a follow-up question to that. And that is, so have we evaluated the monetary value of that trade-off? In other words, we're letting them exceed the development standards by using a PC process because they gave us 3.25 acres for park and maybe an affordable housing. Have you evaluated the monetary, compared the two things? Because, this is a problem we had with PCs before, is that we never had any sense of the comparison of the valuation between what we were getting and what we were giving. And it created a feeling in the community where people really didn't like PCs. And that's why we stopped using them. So does the staff have any evaluation of that?
So I guess I would say first, I think the situation is a little bit different from what you've suggested, in that we're not allowing them really to exceed, to build something bigger, right? What's happening is they have existing buildings, but the parcel that those buildings are on is shrinking. And so when you look at something like FAR, where it's the ratio of the floor area to the size of the parcel, when you shrink the parcel, but the building stays the same, that's why they can't meet the FAR anymore. So I wouldn't characterize this as, we're letting them do more than they otherwise would. We're sort of accounting for the fact that the land is coming to the city. But more generally, to your question of, did the city do some sort of, value analysis? That was a part of the city's process, or the ad hoc committee's process in getting to this point.
I'm sorry, you said it was a part of the city's process, the value analysis?
It was, yes.
Is it going to be presented to the public or boards and commissions?
That's something that we can explore for future hearings. It's not something I'm prepared to speak to today.
Okay, and then is it actually legal for us as a city to create these new smaller parcels that make non-conforming situations where they didn't exist before?
Not if it remains non-conforming. So that's why the comprehensive plan would address the non-conforming uses, and the planned community rezoning would be necessary to make it complying with the zoning that's proposed. As long as it complies with what is ultimately adopted by council, all of those components need to move forward together.
Okay, so there's the non-conforming use because it's all zoned residential for the last 30 years approximately. And then there's the non-conforming development standard. So does that apply to both of those things?
So the zoning would address the non-complying standards, and the land use designation would address the non-complying use for any commercial uses.
Okay, thank you for that.
Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, so I have a follow-on question to what Vice Chair Suma was asking about. So, Mr. Yang, I guess this question is for you. You had mentioned that the ad hoc committee did a financial analysis, and that let me think about this, and that the issue of the FAR was really kind of one because the parcel is shrinking in size rather than a financial issue. But there's a separate component that I think is a financial issue that's not accounted for just in the FAR piece, which is the rezoning of the land. So if it was RM30 before, and then now it's going to be these other potential options that were discussed in Ms. Raybold's presentation, there must be some financial implication there in terms of the value of the land versus the value to the owner of a piece of land that has these different types of zoning. And then furthermore, there's a financial component of the dedication of the land where were the land not dedicated, there would be inclusionary units built as well as park land, a park fee required, right? So that's some of the information that I would like to see, because as Commissioner Reckdahl and Vice Chair Suma mentioned, I'm concerned that I can't tell, like, is this beneficial to the city, or what benefit we are receiving? And is it proportionate to whatever benefit we might be giving away? Thank you.
I don't know that we can respond to all components of that, and if Albert has any additions, but I guess I'll just start by saying certainly we can look into providing information about what, to speak to the inclusionary units. The townhome development project did include 11 units, 15% on-site inclusionary. Now we would not have inclusionary on-site. It allows for the development of up to 75 affordable units, but it doesn't provide it as inclusionary. It provides funds and land towards it. So there is a trade-off there, and we can certainly look into, whether there is, more information we can provide as to that trade-off. With respect to the parks, I know Tim was actually mentioning in his presentation that maybe you can mention it, either Tim or Albert. I think it was six times more parkland being dedicated than what would be otherwise required. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire. Per the ordinance, the 74 townhome units under the city's ordinance would be required to provide 0.62 acres. And we're dedicating a total of 3.25, but the 2.25 is what the city talked about using as restoration of the park and restoration of the creek, in the parkland, and an acre held out of that 3.25 for BMR parcel. So okay. It's so if you look at it
That's
math.
good.
Three
That's good.
3.5 times. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
We can come back with a more, thorough analysis as well, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. That'd be wonderful. I did have another question about the interaction of this with the housing element. So what does this, were these parcels counted in our housing element? And does the change or retention of the R&D space have an impact on, or how does it impact our housing element?
Good question. Let me just bring up the packet for a moment. This wasn't identified. It's not identified as a new housing opportunity site because it's already an existing housing opportunity site in our existing housing element. I believe in the packet, I was just trying to pull it up, it did note how many assumed units could be provided on the parcel. Hold on.
I think it was 221.
Okay, 221. I think that assumed that, all of these existing non-conforming uses were, discontinued and that the site would be turned over as multifamily. But the site, does have this non-conforming use allowance without an amortization date associated with it right now, based on previous council action. So.
Okay, but then in short, no impact on the new housing element.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
And we can get
Does
clarity.
anybody in the housing element working group know?
I don't recall that we had a specific number for that site in the actual inventory,
Okay, that's good to hear.
but it's very easy to check.
Okay. And then another question for staff about the tolling agreement and whether there's any deadline or obligations that the city has in terms of the timeline that we make decisions in public review or anything else.
So the tolling agreement gives the city until the beginning of April 2023 to decide whether it is going to adopt or reject this project as a whole. So, and after that date, Sobrato is able to revert back to their SB 330 application if they wish.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question is about whether changing the zoning or comprehensive plan impacts and allowing the continuing non-conforming use has any impact on our office cap. In other words, we're essentially creating more office, like permanently more office space. Is that right?
Yeah, but it doesn't look at it that way for the office cap. It would look at new uses being added. So it wouldn't affect the office cap because it's all existing.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Templeton?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to piggyback off some of the comments my fellow commissioners made about value to the city and ask staff if housing has a value to the city.
Yes, it absolutely does. And obviously, we're in our housing development process right now, and we all know, how great it is to have more housing units. It's not something I think that we can put a monetary value on, though, in the way that we can in some of these other things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's what makes it difficult and perhaps a little imbalanced to come back with an analysis that speaks only to the financial matters. So I wanted to encourage staff to think about ways to convey that housing is its own value add to the city. We might be able to look at it in terms of what kind of cost might it have if we don't make our numbers and things like that. I don't know. But in any case, even if we can't convert it to dollar amounts, it would be important to include the value and the statement that adds value in the analysis that you provide in the future that talks about value to the city. Thank you.
Commissioner Rupavar.
I was just going to piggyback on what Commissioner Templeton said. I mean, I think it'd be good to also get not just a quantitative, but a qualitative analysis on the social impacts, impacts to young families, diversity, et cetera, greater housing could have to bring more flavor rather than just a financial analysis. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Heckman.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that. And then I do have some other questions, but I'm going to hold those until after public comment. So, but just on this financial issue, I'm not sure what staff's going to bring back, but I think we need to recognize and figure in the calculus, we have to recognize that this is not a typical project where this developer is coming to us and proposing, I want to do 74 units and I want this to be R&D and these 2 offices and we'll give you this park and this money and this land to build something. Rather, the developer has come to us and said, I want to do an SB 330 project which is effectively ministerial. And the city council in its wisdom has gotten in front of them and said, wait, maybe there's something that could work better for us and work better for you. And to their credit, the developer said, okay, let's talk, and has entered into meaningful negotiations and funded all of these documents that we're looking at, and I applaud them for that. But that goes into the calculus too, that this is not just a situation where we can hold some developers' feet to the fire because we have all the cards. Here we don't. And so that needs to be folded in. But again, I don't know that that's a monetary analysis as much as a qualitative one. So with that, I do have technical questions that I'll wait till after public comment. Thanks.
Okay, so let's go to public comment, whether online or in chambers. Medina.
Okay, let me start with the speaker cards that I have received this evening. Our first speaker is Jeff Levinsky.
Will there be 3 or 5 minutes? For this?
Generally, it's 5 unless it's too busy, and it's not too busy. So if you'd like to do 5, that's fine.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Thanks for holding the session. First of all, I very much support full retention of the cannery and the office building, and anyone who does read the DEIR will understand the value it discusses of that. There's the remaining legacy of an earlier era of our city with a unique tale about extraordinary entrepreneurship in a time of adversity. We should be working hard to retain every inch of the cannery and the ash building. Demolishing almost 40% of the cannery building, as would happen under the original proposal and alternative 3, seems very wrong-headed. To that end, I'd like to encourage the commission and everyone else to think about how to improve the current proposals. Here's one idea. If you look at the plans for alternative 3 on packet page 16, you'll note it proposes to build a large, long garage structure between the cannery and the back of the homes along Olive. Alternative 3 would also tear down the portion of the cannery along Park Boulevard and put townhomes there. But you could do it differently. Instead of demolishing part of the cannery, use it as the garage. You've probably all been in older warehouses that have been converted into parking garages. Such reuse requires minimal, if any, exterior modifications. You can probably even fit 2 levels of parking inside the cannery if necessary. Then you wouldn't need to build that new garage, and you could put some townhomes there instead. This would fully preserve the cannery building and likely generate nearly as much housing or as much housing as the current alternative 3. And it seems superior because it totally preserves the cannery. In fact, you could even improve it a little bit by putting the parking where Fry's currently, the empty spot for Fry's, and that way you wouldn't even have to move any of the office uses right now. And that's just one idea. Alternative 2 seems worth looking at a lot more carefully too. Its chief problem seems to be that it would add a 3rd floor to the cannery, altering the building and risking historic integrity. But why is a 3rd floor needed? The cannery building is about 230,000 square feet in size, and only 7,000 square feet wouldn't be used for housing. So that's almost 800 square feet per unit if you only used one floor. If you put 2 stories in, you could probably get 1,200 or more square feet per unit. So I don't know why you need a third floor for that. It produces far more housing than the other proposals. It eliminates R&D, so it incredibly improves our job housing imbalance. That means less traffic, less greenhouse gases. It's the better option, as the DEIR itself states. There's a small problem with table 6-1 on DR page 6-2, and that it doesn't clearly distinguish between proposals that would demolish part of the cannery and ones that won't. Where it says alternative 2 would remove R&D and warehouse space, it really should say that it would preserve the entire building, but convert that space into new use. And that takes me back to alternative 3. I think there was an incorrect statement before saying that there would not be an increase in office space, but there will be, because the Audi building would be converted into office space. And I think that would go against the office. I see someone nodding there. The whole idea, I think, of the NV cap was to try to create a more pleasant residential neighborhood. So the idea of converting a neighborhood serving business into R&D offices seems very much out of what we are trying to do for North Ventura. That brings me to another question about the financial value, and I very much agree with all the comments about trying to understand the financial deals and all the intangibles as well. I think it'd be really good to get that forward to the public. We've never had that before for a PC project, so I'm happy to hear everybody talking about that. Finally, I couldn't find any discussion of what I think should be a no-brainer. Now that the enormous historic importance of the cannery and the ash building has been studied and documented, why don't we go ahead and place them on the California Register of Historical Resources and on our own local registry immediately? We all know that property owners and their goals change over time, and not every project approved by the city ever comes to fruition. Changes in interest rates, construction costs, or other office occupancy rates might cause Sobrado to abandon its current ambitions and go on a different direction. It might even sell the property to someone with very different goals. But by registering the historic buildings, we'll be protecting them and preserving a legacy for all in Palo Alto and beyond, no matter what. So please ask why we're not having these buildings protected independently of everything else here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Liz Gardner.
Good evening.
Is three minutes sufficient, or would you like 5?
A little bit more, 5.
Okay.
It might end sooner, but just listening to the conversation tonight, I had some more thoughts. Mostly, this parcel is like a 100-year opportunity, like a once in a century opportunity for us as a community to really come together and do what's right for the future, for today. And as I was listening tonight, I was very concerned that an RM30 that has been designated such for almost 30 years is going to be chopped up into different designated zones where we won't ever get it back. And to carefully look at this EIR and these alternative plans for the opportunity of our community. I want to thank Sobrado and the CC's ad hoc commitment to taking this 14-acre site as a serious contender for our areas unhoused. Our state and our county and our city is in a humanitarian emergency. However, I'm so disappointed that much of the area's plan is designated for commercial use and for market rate townhomes. If everyone has noticed that much of office work is hybrid now, a fact that the pandemic has changed forever, and our community has to address the massive housing hole that is 50 years past due. Mostly what is necessary is homes for our regular wage service workers, families who should be given priority for homes near good transit options, walking, schools, hospitals, and yes, jobs. Jobs to work in all of the above that I just mentioned. 1 acre of parcel of this 14 is only earmarked for low-income family homes. An acreage for more homes for all incomes and abilities, family size. The site could be the gold standard, right? It can be realized. Please, I'd like to see a separation between the park designation and the parcel designated for housing, which I believe and strongly encourage there be more housing for more affordable low-income housing for low-wage workers. I also really urge you to look at what types of units. Sobrato had a beautiful rendering of the outside and the ground space, but what are these units going to look like interior wise? Beautiful facades and massing and, you know, parking, all that's great, but these are homes, and one of your commissioners, Templeton, talked about this. It's like, what's the added value, right? We look at financial. Well, what is the added value of community and our future, and where these homes are going to take our residents into the universe of the world, or, you know, our workforce? These are things that I think need to seriously be looked at. This is an RM30 site. It's been for almost, 40 years. We're in a housing hole. Let's keep it whole and not break it apart. We'll never get it back. Let's not give away more home zoned areas. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you into the next one?
I have 2 more speaker cards and I do not see any raised hands on Zoom. So our next speaker is Rebecca Sanders.
She actually departed.
Oh, okay. So my last speaker card is from Terry Holzimmer.
Would you like 5?
I would love 5.
Okay, go for it.
First of all, I just want to clarify that if I speak at the 26th meeting, will that preclude me from speaking now or?
No.
Okay.
Won't.
All right. First of all, I'd like to give some thank yous really quickly. I'd like to thank Claire, the city staff, for its cooperation in sending out the information. That was most helpful to me. I'd also like to thank staff again for the time extension. I really appreciate it because the original date of ending this on the DEIR on Halloween was a very bad choice because I'm a school teacher. And last but not least, I really want to appreciate some of the DEIR analysis of Alternative 2 in this report. Alternative 2, which respects the historical aspects of the building, is something I hope the city will continue to review, improve upon, and study as the EIR process moves ahead. I do have concerns about adding the extra story and how that affects the historical aspects of the building, but I do believe that it is much better than Alternative 3. I want to quickly thank also, because I want to speak briefly about what is dear to my heart. And I speak emotionally a little bit here. I care greatly as an educator about our history. And there is I think no more important building in Palo Alto than the project that you have in front of you. The reason I think this is true is because we talk about our recent pioneers like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and David Packard. We even have a wonderful garage. However, what we don't talk about is truly our history, way before those people came onto the scene. Pioneers like Thomas Foon Chu, I want to mention, are worthy of the same admiration and recognition that we treat our modern innovators like Packard and Jobs. This is the reason why this project, 340 or 200 Portage, whichever you want to call it, is not just another old, tired industrial building that has outlived its usefulness. It's truly an invaluable historic resource and should be recognized for the age before computers and silicon chips ever existed. There was a beautiful place here once, and it still is, but in those days, it was known as a very fertile valley that was one of the best fruit and vegetable growing areas in the entire world, and it was recognized for that. Built in 1918 originally, this building, 340 Portage, represents one of the last cannery operation buildings that still is standing in our valley today. I urge you to be concerned as this project moves forward to make sure that this project is properly recognized. The city's own consultant, Page and Turnbull, as you have heard earlier, recognize this as a state resource, historical resource. And I urge you to consider adding this, which I think you have the power to do, I hope, to add this to the historical registry of our city. It is long overdue that this city recognize that this is not just an industrial building. Thomas Foon Chu was such an instrumental part of our city. He started let me tell you a little bit about him if you don't know. He started the Bayside Cannery in 1906, and there's a large cannery that is falling down in San Jose. However, our structure here in Palo Alto is one of the last really remaining structures. He turned the Bayside Cannery into the third largest cannery operation in the world. Thomas was not only a cannery innovator, he discovered the first way to can asparagus, where he became known as the Asparagus King. But even more important for Thomas, for us today, he was known for treating workers' rights and having worker rights in his building. He gave workers a place to live free of charge. He gave them food on a regular basis. And he was also known for treating all races and people the same. He hired women. He hired people of all races in his business. I'd just like to finally say that this is an opportunity to think about the future and protecting this building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the speakers on the item.
That is correct. I do not have any speaker cards, and I do not see anyone on Zoom who raised their hand. No raised hands.
Okay, so let's come back to the commission for other questions. I see Commissioner Rupar.
Not to open up this can of worms again, but I've been thinking about the process issue. Ms. French, if we're leaving public comment open until November 15th, is that what you guys proposed?
No, there was a proposal to move it to the very next meeting, October 26th.
The public comment period on the draft IR will close November 15th now.
Yes, but I think what I thought you were saying is when is the next
this
study session?
No,
Okay.
I was thinking about the comment period. I'm just going to pose it. But if the comment period is going to end November 15th, wouldn't it make sense for us to have a follow-up meeting November 30th so that we can hear all that, so we can read all that public comment?
So we are currently planning and hoping to return on November 30th. So the PC process, the Plan Community Zoning process, requires you to come to the Planning Commission with a conceptual project. Then you get a recommendation from the Planning Commission to move forward to the Architectural Review Board with a more detailed design, and then returns to the Planning Commission for a formal recommendation on the final, plan community proposed zoning, land use amendments, and the detailed design plan. So currently, we're hoping to come back for that initial recommendation to move forward from a conceptual project to the Architectural Review Board on November 30th, following the draft DIR review period, and then returning to Planning Commission hopefully in January, February timeframe.
Okay. So that's why we're 1026 instead of
Council
after.
Yang.
Yeah,
Council Yang might be able to help here.
I guess I would just also respond that, we wouldn't expect to provide the Planning Commission with all of the comments that we receive on the draft DIR for the PTC's review. All those comments will be included in the final EIR along with.
And then you respond to them in there. Okay, yeah. I got it. Yeah. Now it makes sense. Sorry. It's just been thinking about it this whole time. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other commissioner comments? I think Commissioner Heckman, you had some other ones.
Yeah, I do have some questions, but just to follow up on that. So it is part of the CEQA process. After the comment period ends, staff has to compile all of those comments, both written and oral, and respond to them. And that is a lengthy process, of course, dependent upon the volume of content you get. But I can't imagine with this project that work will be done in 2 weeks in time for November 30th. I would expect it to take a number of months.
Yes.
To do that work. And as Council Yang said, those come out in that's one of the aspects of the final EIR. It includes the comment and response to comments, and sometimes some adjustments to the project, or in this case, the project alternative to respond to those comments. So it's all part of the process. So my questions, I just kind of go through them in the order that I saw them in reviewing the staff report. My first question is about parking. There's a couple references in the staff report on, let's see, packet page 26, and again on 34 to 36, about there are some anticipated shortfall in vehicle parking compared to standards, or otherwise applicable standards. And I just wanted to, I suspect that shortfall can be addressed in the context of our planned community district zoning, right? That's one of the many areas where city can be flexible using that designation. And I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't some reason that you can't modify parking requirements in a PCD zone.
That's correct. It's one of the levers that could be changed in the PC. It could also be addressed as a parking adjustment under the existing code.
Okay, so that's not going to stop this project. I did notice also there was, and it was kind of odd when you think about 15-acre site. Currently, in the current plans, a bike parking shortfall, but I'm confident that that can be worked out through some design thought. Let's see. So I was curious on the TDM. There's a target reduction of 15%, and Mr. Steele mentioned it in his remarks, and I saw it in the staff report, and I was curious about its origin, and I found on packet page 101 a footnote to table 1: the project would be required to meet a 15% trip reduction set by the City of Palo Alto staff for this project, and so I was just curious as to why 15% rather than a higher or lower figure. I'm just, the origin of that number, where it came from.
Albert, do you want me to start? It's okay. So the 15% came from the negotiations on the development agreement. It's a little bit unclear, whether it would, a TDM plan would apply to this project. It's kind of a unique scenario. Typically, as kind of outlined in the staff report, typically if you have more than 50 peak hour trips, it triggers the need for a TDM plan. And if you do a TDM plan, we base it based on the project area and would typically require 20%. In this scenario, you have existing research and development uses, and then you have the townhome, market rate townhome project, and then the city's affordable housing project. And so all of those together under the development agreement would trigger that 50 peak hour trip scenario, but it doesn't trigger it without the city's affordable housing project incorporated into that. And so whether the developer would be required to apply a TDM program for, their commercial or somehow to their townhome development project, which would be quite difficult, it seems like it wouldn't really necessarily apply. And so, but the applicant, as part of the development agreement, has proposed a 15% reduction. Now, your comments and input on that are certainly, warranted and appreciated. So.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation. And I don't have any objection to the 15%. And I did pick up some of the flavor of the, whether or not they are required to do any TDM from the staff report. I was mostly just curious as to how that particular number was arrived at, and I think your answer, it was negotiated, and so I'm fine with it. I don't have any issue under these circumstances with that target, and I appreciate Sobrato stepping up to something that's actually close to the number that would apply if a TDM were clearly required. So I think we're good there. This is a comment, not a question, but I think this is a topic that's going to echo through all of the discussions as we move forward, and that is historic resources and preservation. And this is always a challenging issue whenever you're looking at redevelopment of a site that has a structure of historic importance. But I always feel that you need to balance retaining those structural ties with our past, with making room for modernization and growth. And so as we move forward here, and I think the project is trying to do that. I think in some of the renderings help reflect that today. So I just think that needs to be that recognition needs to be part of our dialogue as this moves forward. It's not an all or nothing proposition. It's how can we keep the past and move toward the future. Trees. I read 107 removed and 120 planted. So those are good numbers. And I think, and maybe staff can help me because I couldn't find it sitting up here again. I think I read that none of the 107 are heritage, but many of them are protected, or some number of them are protected. Did I read that right somewhere?
Yeah. So it's a little complicated because none of them are heritage trees. Okay. The SB 330 townhome project, because it was filed as an SB 330 project, locking in development standards before our tree ordinance changed, is not subject to the new ordinance requirements, which is more all-encompassing in terms of what is considered protected trees. The development agreement was filed after the tree ordinance was adopted. And so it is technically subject to the current requirements. But as a development agreement, so I think when we're looking at and analyzing that, we want to understand what the baseline is in comparison to the current ordinance. But the planned community rezoning and the development agreement would allow for, what our commissions and boards and council will allow in terms of tree removal. So we want to align that as much as possible with our current ordinance, obviously. But it is a little bit of a awkward scenario in that respect.
Right, but that's good background when we're looking at this alternative 3 and this proposal that involves removing 107 and 120, what it's an alternative to. That needs to color our view on that. So, Chair, I do have a few more questions, but I think maybe I'll yield the floor and you can come back to me after some others.
Okay, very generous. Commissioner Chang.
Can I just follow up on that tree question? Because I had a similar one. But so what, with the number of trees that are being removed, I understand that none of them are heritage under the original tree ordinance. And then what would the situation be now? Because hopefully then the replacement trees, we can ask that like larger trees or whatever it is.
Certainly, yeah. So we can certainly ask for more replacement trees under that. Some of those may not be able to be replaced on site, so they could be provided off-site or in lieu potentially. We've asked for clarification on the plans. When we reviewed the initial plan set that is before you tonight, it didn't analyze based on our new ordinance. So we've asked for it to be revised.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, because I think that would be, one of our requests, just to see if they're willing to, if there's a significant number of currently protected trees that are, I would like to know how many currently protected trees would be impacted and if there's any willingness to, address it.
Commissioner Rectal?
Yeah, one of the goals was to decrease or lower employment density of the area. And so I'm a little nervous about the cannery being 150,000 square feet or almost 150,000 square feet. Could I ask the applicant about their anticipated employment density?
Yes.
Good evening. Yes, I think part with the R&D use instead of an office use in the building, the intent is not to have quite as an intense use as an office potentially. Also with the 15% reduction and the slightly lower parking ratio, we're expecting to be able to control the density much more than what an office potentially could have in the building.
So what density would you anticipate?
Typically for an R&D use, we're going to have 3 to 4 employees per 1,000. But what happens is a lot of the space like Playground Global, which is in the western end of the cannery building now, they have a lot of shop space, a lot of CNCs, workplaces, a kitchen. So it ends up averaging the space down to about 3 to 3.5.
3 to 3.5 people per 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I mean, we don't have a way to say you cannot have more than 1 or 2 or 5, whatever. But with the R&D designation on it, the lower parking and a 15% reduction, the volume of people in that space is going to certainly have some control factors.
Yeah, that's going to be 500 employees there.
That's there today. We're
How
not
many-
adding any new R&D space. We have those tenants in the buildings today.
How many employees do you have there today?
I'd have to go count, but that's how the space is currently occupied by R&D uses.
So this is the portion outside of Fry's, between playground and global,
Yeah,
and
right,
then along.
and the other spaces that are occupied in that building are all R&D uses in the building today. If I walked over there today, as you know, the pandemic cloud that's still there, a lot of people are working from home part-time and such. So at any one time, you're probably not going to see the full extent of those employees on site at one time today.
Yeah, I mean, I have real mixed feelings about this. In some ways, there's some things I really like about this project. Like creek restoration has the possibility of being just gorgeous. And we are getting that deep value, the deep affordable housing. And it's just on inclusionary units. It's below 80% AMI. So there's a lot of good things about this. But I was on NVCAP with Tim, and we envisioned that this would be a neighborhood that was provided a lot of housing. We have such a short housing in the city. This would be a center for housing that would have hundreds or thousands of units, and primarily be a nice neighborhood, vibrant neighborhood centered around housing. And still, this in some ways is a lost opportunity. This land is RM30, and we're building or retaining hundreds of thousands of square feet of office. And that, when you're short of housing and you take RM30 and allow office to remain there, that's kind of hard to swallow. But it's I don't know how to conclude this, but I have mixed feelings, we'll put it that way.
While you're up, I wanted to ask a housing question of the developer. Could you just tell us what the assortment is in the townhouses? Bedroom size?
3s and 4s in the 74 townhomes.
3 and 4 bedrooms?
Correct. David would have the exact count for each, maybe at his fingertips. David, do you have that? It's a test, David.
Yeah, I didn't have that one prepared. I think we have mostly 4 bedrooms. There's a couple of the units are 3 bedrooms, so it would probably be more than half them would be 4-bedroom units.
Okay. Other commissioners? Items? Vice Chair Suma?
Thank you. So I'm wondering under CEQA if you can evaluate the impact of something that's not there, because you've sort of evaluated as part of this project the affordable housing that the city would build on the land that Sobrato has so generously given and money. But I don't think CEQA can take that into consideration because it's not there.
Well, that's actually what the purpose of CEQA is to do, is to evaluate what's being proposed, right? And so this is a situation where a lot of the site is already built, but for example, CEQA is evaluating the townhomes, which are not there right now. And the purpose of including the affordable housing as a part of this EIR on this site, right, it's part of our plan, the city's plan on what to do with this property. But 2, if we do have a future project with a nonprofit partner to build, affordable housing that falls within the parameters of what we've assumed here, which is 75 units, then we don't need a separate environmental review for that project. It's already been evaluated and studied here.
And what about the compatibility of that project with the historic resource? I really didn't have time to read the entire DEIR, but I don't know that the other buildings, the new townhouses or the affordable, I don't know that the compatibility just visually of those was considered for impacts in this draft environmental review.
Go on, Claire.
I don't know if, in terms of the actual townhomes, we have our environmental consultant, Rincon Consultants, is online. I don't know if Carly, you could speak to that in a moment. The future affordable housing, we don't have a detailed plan for at the moment, so we really can't analyze that. But when we have a detailed plan, we would evaluate whether it falls within what was assumed for the draft EIR and evaluated. And if we feel that, there are concerns or we need further evaluation of that, then, we can prepare an addendum or similar if we feel it's necessary to do so.
Yeah, and it's just that the setting of a historic resource is an important part of what makes it important. And then if alternative 3 is what happens when it ends up being built, I'm just confirming it won't be historic anymore, right? Because we've removed a third of it approximately.
I guess that's not necessarily the case. The draft EIR concludes that the removal of that portion would be a significant impact on this resource, but it's a different analysis from whether the resource retains integrity. And in this case, because the historic nature is based on events rather than architecture, it's possible, it's not an analysis that we've done, but it's possible that the site would retain its historic integrity, and so could be a listed resource.
And a member of the public mentioned an option. I don't know if the property owner is interested in this at all, but of using the portion that's going to be removed of the cannery building for parking. Is that a possibility that anyone is interested in, and sort of retaining more of the historic resource, or is that a realistic possibility?
I don't know if the applicant could speak to that.
We haven't provided all of the backup information as to why, but we have done, even before the ad hoc committee discussions, looked at various options for trying to identify housing that we could support and would and make economic sense, density wise and location wise. And the best location in all of that analysis came back to the original location of the 94 townhomes, which were all along Park rather than buried in the project.
Okay, thank you. I just had I understand that the applicant is being very generous by giving us land and $5 million. I forget the budget on Wilton Court. I don't know how far $5 million go and how much the land is worth for building 75 units. I think a unit of affordable housing cost about $800,000. I can't do the math that quickly in my head. But I'm also wondering, as an all deed restricted affordable housing project, it will be probably at the 30 to 60 area median income AMI. The inclusionary is typically at 100 to 120, which makes it nearly market rate. I wonder why we don't need both of those things there. So the inclusionary portion in the townhomes, and also provide for a future all affordable project.
I guess I would say, of course, we need as much affordable housing as possible at all income levels. But what's presented in the staff report is the sort of the deal that was negotiated.
Right.
If we had asked for more in the affordable arena, there may have been, some other lever that would have moved.
Yeah, and that brings up another, like, I'm not second guessing the ad hoc or anything. It's just that we have no idea what happened and how it came out to be this way. So I guess I'm also, like my colleague, Commissioner Rectal, I'm a little disappointed that this site is retaining so much of the commercial, which we didn't really envision as being the right way to go there. And I guess I'm a little bit, I'm concerned that we're not, I think this might be the last cannery in the Bay Area. I'm not sure from the staff report. It mentioned that. And so I'm wondering if that might not be considered not only just a significant aspect, but a significant impact, but a cumulative impact, if it really is the last one. So the issue of how much commercial is being retained and the issue of how much of the historic is being removed is a concern, even though there's a lot of interesting things about this project. And I understand the complexities. And I forgot to mention how much I appreciated the applicant coming here tonight and to say hi to Mr. Steele, because I was on the NV cap with him. So sorry, I forgot to say hi.
Thanks, Doria.
Commissioner Heckman, back to you.
Chair, you haven't had a chance to ask questions or comments. Before I go to round two, do you have some things you want to?
Yeah, I asked about the housing, which I tagged onto that. I have a question on the hazardous materials, the plume and so on. Is that sort of, we don't know what we're getting into, or is it, we think it's okay, but it just has to be mitigated?
With respect to the plume, it's known impacts from volatile organic compounds and groundwater contamination. And so
I don't have the expertise to know if that's easy or hard.
Okay. Well, typically, there are different ways. It's caused by, as I'm sure you're aware, off-site migration to the site that's down gradient from the variant and HV sites. Typical, we cannot require under CEQA mitigation for impacts of the project on the environment. But under our comprehensive plan, we address those impacts to the potential future users or existing users of the site. We address those impacts through conditions of approval of the project. And what we require is oversight from an appropriate agency, which is typically either County Department of Health, Department of Toxic Substance Control, or Regional Water Quality Control Board. Typically, the applicant either uses County Health or the Regional Water Quality Control Board to provide that oversight. And what they will do is they do a complete, assessment of the site. They provide that information. They provide a proposed mitigation plan for it. It's reviewed by the oversight agency who approves their mitigation plan. A lot of times that includes a vapor intrusion mitigation system. That's pretty standard for this area, but it's really, site dependent. They look at it and evaluate exactly what's on the site and what's the most appropriate mitigation for the property. So, but that is the typical standard, is to do some form of vapor intrusion mitigation system.
So you're not anticipating, unless we find Indian remains or something, which is a little bit different, you're not anticipating this being a deal stopper?
No.
So, yeah, it's one of the things that we are working with Sobrato to make sure that we do the studies on that parcel that the city would be obtaining. And so we understand what we're getting into before we actually get into this deal.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing I was going to say is that, a lot of the comments from the developer tonight referenced 3B, I think, which was approved by this body, not unanimously, shall we underscore? And that was actually overturned at council, and they went back to alternative 1, and then this has been adjusted. So it's gone through a lot of process. But the net, as a couple of my colleagues have noted, is it's much less housing than I think anybody in all of 3 scenarios was looking at in all of the NVCAT meetings. So it's a little frustrating in that regard. And we're not the ones to raise this, and we're not going to do it tonight. But if there are ways to have more housing here added to the project with some trade-offs, that might be worth having a discussion about. Maybe with the ad hoc or the council or something. But there's an ongoing frustration in the community if that's the net debt where we are right now. So I just wanted to kind of express that. Okay, Mr. Heckman.
Thank you. So, and that's a great segue, Chair, because I want to talk about housing units. First, I want to note that our notice tonight, our agenda indicates 71 new townhome condominiums. Reading the staff report and the DEIR, it looks like that number is 74. So I just wanted to point that out to staff, that sometimes you reuse these descriptions in future agendas. So clean that up, and we just picked up 3 units right there. So that's a good start.
Thank you for noting that. So
Yeah.
apologies.
Add a couple of zeros on that in your next comment, please.
All right, but actually that leads to a question I had for Mr. Steele, and that is, you're at 74 units in this alternative, and I recognize there are a lot of constraints to this site, but I was, and I'm sure you've looked at this, but I want to ask the question, is there a way you can increase the unit count in an economically viable way, so that we do end up with more units on the market rate side of this overall development?
Part of our original SB 330 project was 94 townhome units, but they, you might not have noticed or remember, but it actually goes to the creek side of the portage. And it conflicted, if you will, with the priority of accumulating enough land for the naturalization of the creek, which was part of a study that the city did of the options for the creek naturalization. As well as that's the location that the city preferred for a site for affordable housing. So then, any more would really be looking at removing more of the cannery building of that type of product.
Okay, and thank you for that. And those are 2 of the constraints that I was thinking of. It's really a confined space that you're trying to work with, and it sounds like I would fully expect that you've studied this, and this is, as close to the sweet spot as you can find. I did want to talk for a minute about the future affordable housing project, which on packet page 26 is called the assumed 75 unit future affordable housing project. When we come back and talk about this at our next meeting, I don't want to go down that street 7, 8, 10 years from now and see an empty lot. This property is going to be turned over to the city, and I'm kind of curious as to what mechanisms cities use in this circumstance to incentivize the city to actually build the housing, and not to let this languish for years while funds are being collected or the best possible deal is being struck or all the neighbors are being satisfied, because that's not a win-win. What this project is proposing with this could be a win-win. And so again, I don't think it's a fair question to ask staff to answer off the cuff tonight, but I am interested in what we can do if this alternative 3 moves forward to ensure that there's some kind of fire lit to get affordable housing built there. Maybe it's through an amendment to our comp plan, one of the goals and policies, whatever. But I'd be interested in hearing about those things. I do want to, then I want to talk about the draft EIR. These are my last questions. And let's see. So the proposed project is the SB 330 project that Sobrato initially proposed. Alternative one is the no project alternative, which CEQA requires for every EIR. What if we did nothing? Then there is alternative two, which our last public speaker mentioned. It's the adaptive reuse of the existing building. And finally, alternative three, which is really, it's kind of an odd meeting, because usually when a project comes to you, you're talking about the main projects discussed in the draft EIR, but here our focus is really on the alternative three, which is the development agreement deal version of the thing. So, and I was curious about this alternative two adaptive reuse, and what I noticed on page 6 dash, let's see. Now I'm not sure where it's stated, but alternative to the adaptive reuse, alternative to the draft EIR says it would meet most of the project objectives and again, these are all by comparison to the proposed project, and I really didn't understand that, and so but I want to understand it. So if we can go to page 6. Yeah, that's where it says that statement. Yeah, on 6-5. So if we go to the table on 6-2, which one of our public speakers mentioned, table 6.1, which is the top half of the page. And here's a side-by-side comparison, which is useful. So I had a question for staff in the first column. Are you with me on that table? Okay. Where it says proposed project, and we're working down 91 residential units, then other units, rehabilitation of the portion of a portion of the existing building at 200 Portage Avenue for R&D uses. So this is what Sobrato proposed with its SB 330 application. The staff, do you happen to know the portion of the existing building that would be rehabilitated for R&D use? Do we have that square footage?
It's the same as the development agreement alternative.
So it's 142,000 square feet.
Mhm.
Okay. So, but alternative two would remove 142,000 square feet of R&D space, right?
No.
That's what
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, alternative. Okay, this is the adaptive reuse one, right? So it struck me that if one of the goals of if the primary goals of the original project were to have 91 townhomes and 142,000 square feet of R&D space.
No, so the goals of the development agreement are different from the stated objectives of the draft EIR. So the draft EIR has to identify objectives to help the lead agency in identifying reasonable range of alternatives for the project. And so the project, has a list of objectives on, hold on.
Yeah.
2.6 on 213 of the EIR. So.
Yeah.
It's on page 2.
Yeah, 2-13, right.
That's 13.
Right. Yeah. So, and this was part of my confusion. You're right. And I said project goals. I meant objectives. And I had noticed that these project objectives 1 through 5 don't include anything about the R&D space.
Right.
Right. And so I guess, but it's clearly, it's a part of what the developer is envisioning in the proposed project. So it makes me wonder if the project objectives are incomplete in a way that makes alternative 2 look like it meets most of the objectives, because all of the true objectives of the project proponent aren't being listed.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's the result of I guess a quirk of the initial project application for 200 Portage for the 91 townhomes. That application came in just with a clear description of the townhomes, and it didn't really address what was going to happen with the remaining portion of the cannery. And so when we first put together the draft EIR for that 91 townhome project, you know, the objectives just had to do with the residential part of the construction, and we didn't know sort of what was going to happen with the rest of the site. But it is, yeah, it's a good comment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, and I would mention that of course, project applicants like Sobrato here, they're allowed to comment on draft EIRs too, because there's kind of a firewall that's typically built between the applicant and the environmental consultant. That's a city-controlled process so that the applicant doesn't have undue influence. And so sometimes it's useful for the applicant to make comments on the draft EIR just to make sure there's clarity. Because right now I am concerned that somebody reading this draft EIR could think that it's doing the adaptive reuse pretty much ends up with the same cluster of uses as the proposed project would, or as the development agreement alternative 3 would, when in fact that's really not the case when you consider the R&D factor. So again, this is just a point of accuracy for the document that maybe can be looked at moving forward. And then I just wanted to confirm that when we look at alternative 2, that adaptive reuse, the 281 units in that conceptual project, those are all in the cannery building. Is that right?
There would be 12. Oh, yeah. So 281 in the cannery building and 12 additional in an additional townhome.
Some little cluster someplace.
There is a little cluster that was identified in council's preferred alternative that would be behind the Ash building, roughly where the affordable housing project is, being identified.
Okay. And in that alternative 2, there would not be a separate 75 unit affordable housing unit project, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Those were my questions. Thanks so much. And I do want to thank staff. I mean, as daunting as it is for us to look at all this material, I know staff has read it cover to cover, probably more than once. And so it's a lot for us to digest, and it's really helpful to have your guidance as we try to do that.
So I do have a brief response also, Commissioner, to your question about, how likely is it, or what can we do to make sure this affordable housing gets built? And this relates to a question that Commissioner Suma had earlier as well. The Wilton Court project, the city ultimately provided $20 million in funding for that project, but the initial ask was 10, and that was based on the project's projection that they would get some funding from some other sources, and 1 or 2 of those fell through, and they asked the city to increase the city's contribution. So I would say 10 to $20 million is probably a reasonable range of what the city can expect to have to kick in on a project, and it may be lower than that, since in this case the land would be free. But that was one of the considerations, and in seeking to acquire land for this project. And so in terms of reaching that, I think the $5 million contribution was intended to help get the city, well on the way to making that project a reality. And, hopefully we'll have other kind of funding sources for affordable housing as well coming online.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just editorially, in the housing element, we looked at all kinds of options, including using city land for affordable housing. And that definitely changed the economics. And the city is getting this for affordable housing and we need it. So I'm not as worried about the motivation because we have some land that some other developer can use. So, and we've even talked about, of course, maintaining the ownership of that and leasing it out in the context of the housing element. So this would be probably more likely than a downtown parking lot to be developed first for affordable housing. Okay, are there any other comments? Go ahead, Keith.
I had one follow-up to Bart's question about, is there any way to increase the density here or a number of units? And one thing I do like about the townhouses is that they have a lot of bedrooms, 3 and 4 bedrooms, and that's really hard to find. A lot of our developments are just efficiencies or 1 bedrooms. So that's really good. But I parked tonight over in Bryant there, right next to Heritage Park. And there they have a nice 4-story apartment building, which is pretty dense and would provide a lot of housing. And so can I ask the applicant about, have they considered something like that at that location?
You mean more height?
Just as different styles as opposed to townhouse having an apartment complex.
Sure.
And right now the height is limited to 35, but if you're able to go above that, would that be a feasible alternative to those townhouses?
Thanks, Keith, for asking the question. I think currently with the headwinds that are coming our direction, starting and designing an apartment building that probably won't be able to break ground for 3 to 4 years is not, in our eyes, economically feasible.
How's the market in Palo Alto for rental housing versus purchase?
The purchase, I value-wise to the underlying is better for purchasing right now in Palo Alto than it would be for apartments for us to build them on spec.
We saw a recent project over on West Bay Shore, which also was townhouses. And it seems townhouses right now are a very popular design. There must be demand for townhouses?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's especially at this location in the walking distance to the Caltrain station and being on the Park Avenue Bicycle Boulevard, all good stuff. It has a lot of attractions for ownership.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then I would entertain a motion to continue this item to 10/26.
I'll make a motion to continue this item to date certain 10/26.
And we need a second,
I'll
please.
second.
Vice Chair Sumo moved and seconded by Commissioner Chang to move this to the make sure I have the date, 6th, right? Okay, any questions? If not, please take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Heckman,
Yes.
Chair Lowing,
Yes.
Commissioner Rekdal,
Yes.
Commissioner Rupervar,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yes.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
I would just like to add as we conclude this, that I thought the staff presentation written and verbal was just outstanding. So thanks to Claire and just really strong, not just because of the complexity, but kind of the whole layout of it was really good.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, I think we have minutes. Let's see. Yes, we have September 14, 22 draft verbatim and summary meeting minutes. Correct? Am I correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
And I received the revisions from from Commissioner Hackman for verbatim minutes and no revisions to summary minutes.
Okay. Do we want to do these separately?
No together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll move approval of the September 14th verbatim minutes as revised and summary minutes as unrevised.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Okay, roll call vote.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Hackman,
Okay.
Chair Lowing,
Sure.
Commissioner Regdal,
Okie dokie.
Commissioner Ruparvar,
Yes.
Vice Chair Suma,
Yep, peachy.
Commissioner Templeton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. And now we're on to commission questions, comments, announcements, and future agenda items. First of all, questions or comments? Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, so I had a question about one of the public comments that came in. It was 650 Seal about a JDU. And I guess the community member was questioning a project that was built as was permitted as a 4.3 with a JADU, but then being marketed as a 5.4. And I just wondered, is there anything we can do about that? I mean, that is, we've had discussions about our concern about JDs being built and then not actually being used for housing. So I just didn't know if there's anything we can do about it.
That's one of the items for potentially for next week, right? No, it's a different one? Okay, sorry.
No, I don't think that I don't think that, especially around how something is marketed, I think it's always like fairly fuzzy. There's no obligation that someone, uses the JADU as a separate dwelling unit. As long as it meets our requirements, which are, not to have an internal connection, there wouldn't be any enforcement action we could take. If we found out that, after they had built it and gotten inspected, that they put in a doorway to really integrate it into the house, then that's something, we could issue a notice of violation and make them remove that.
And there's no way that we can really find out because we don't check on those after inspection, right?
Yeah. If we got a report that was actually what it was, if someone went and toured the home and then, reported it on 311, we could go out and inspect.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so looking at the meeting schedule, Commissioner Heckman was suggesting that we move away from the day after Election Day for a lot of reasons, including, I think, at least 5 of us are involved in some way in something having to do with elections in a very intense way. So, part of it has to do, of course, with upcoming items that we would have to hear. But even in that regard, although it's a little bit harder to call special meetings, doing it this far in advance, that could work and just get away from that day. So I would certainly be amenable to supporting that idea. And we probably don't know yet what's coming up that far out. So we could just go ahead and say we're going to. I mean, you don't know in the sense that you don't know what's going to be ready because it's somewhat short term.
Chair? Yeah, I believe we're pushing off the 660 University that was going to come back on the 26th because now we need to do this again. So that's going to go on the 9th. And then we have the review of the comprehensive plan implementation plan for the 9th.
Yeah, I thought in spite of moving this, continuing this last item, I thought you weren't yet sure if 660 was going to be ready for 1700.
Right, that's just showing on the tentative. So I'm pushing that to the 9th to make way for this. This being the Sobrato project.
Okay, so if you think we need to see that in November, then it would be a question of moving the one meeting and doing a special meeting or not. So we'll get some conversation. Commissioner Templeton.
Thank you, Chair. One way to handle this is to determine if a number of people are not going to be available on the 9th, and therefore we would not have a quorum.
I only know of one tentative, which is Commissioner Reckdahl is going to be out of town.
Well, I'm suggesting that if people don't want to meet on the 9th, that they declare themselves unavailable on the 9th.
Your hand's still up.
I'm unavailable on the 9th.
Okay.
Anyone else unavailable on the 9th?
Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, I'm unavailable on the 9th as well. Unavailable.
Vice Chair Suma and Chair Lowing, we are counting on your leadership in this moment.
There's two unavailable. As of this moment, I'm physically available. Is that my favorite day to come? No, because of what's leading up to that. And if it could be moved a week, I think it would make it more convenient. But
would it help to look at the start time? Because typically start time is at 6.
No, not really.
We don't. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Sorry.
So we have 3 people that are unavailable now on the 9th, by the way, Chair. But the point is, and let me speak as someone who is not currently running, it was hell last time. It was really a shame that we didn't reschedule our meeting because it was a draining experience to have gone through all of that the day before and then need to be on point for a worthwhile discussion. I think we can recognize the situation and suggest maybe a better time.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think that's why we were talking about it, because I felt personally it was a little too hard on some of the commissioners 2 years ago. And I didn't think it was very nice. In retrospect, I wish we had thought about that ahead of time.
We have the desire not to run to midnight because we don't think we make good decisions at midnight. And I would put this in the same category.
So if there's any other commissioners who are unavailable and would like to alleviate the candidates from being the quorum deniers, feel free to declare your availability.
No, I really appreciate your comments, Commissioner Temple, but we can just vote as a body, not to meet. We don't, and I think you said there were 3, but I only seen 2. So anyway, we could just vote not to meet, and then we'll just have to do a special meeting.
You said Commissioner Reckdahl. Commissioner Chang said she was unavailable. I'm unavailable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that you were. Okay. She's unavailable.
Oh,
yeah, we hadn't heard that. So, I mean, to me, that's convincing anyway, because, to be looking at these items with a commission of 4, I don't think it makes sense. So let's go back to Commissioner Heckman's idea.
Well, the 16th is not quite available because that's a housing. The 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving, is that more desirable?
Nope. Unavailable. Out of town, unavailable.
There are other days in the week besides
Wednesday. I was curious about some of those other days of the week, like the day before the 16th, which would be the 15th. That's a Tuesday. Tuesday the 15th. I'm also. Do we have some overlap between the Housing Element Committee that's meeting on the 16th and our commission? Is that an issue, or is it a staffing issue?
Probably more staffing, but and the fact that people might want to not have to pick between the two if it's a community meeting that feels important
Well,
to go to.
I know a lot of times when we're meeting here on a Wednesday, there's some kind of subcommittee of the city council.
Finance committee.
Yeah, meeting over there. And so I think
Sure.
sometimes people do have to pick and choose.
True.
So again, I wasn't entirely understanding why the 16th doesn't work
Well, just there's
unless
something
there's,
else on the calendar, but we can pursue it, and I can talk to, John, the director, about, so he would probably be at that housing element meeting, and I wouldn't get to go to that one. I'd come to this one. Yeah.
would that be a hardship for you? We're a pretty entertaining bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a rail committee as well.
On the 16th?
On the 16th.
What time does that start?
Housing element, rail committee, that starts at 12 p.m. So that is afternoon, yeah, actually.
So, I mean, we might want to look at start time as an earlier start time. If that other meeting starts at 7, let's say, if we started at 5, then we could get through 2 hours worth, something like that. I don't know if the commission is willing.
Yeah, I'm flexible on a start time on the 16th. I do think it would be most humane to move this off of the 9th. I did feel the sort of the tiredness last year in the election cycle after, because it's a long night that night before. And I applauded both of our candidates for sort of sticking with it and staying with the program, but there's no reason to do that unnecessarily. So I like
Right.
that.
So I think we got that part concluded. The question is if there's an alternative, and it would be better to try to solve it now as opposed to do it by mail. But if you want to look at the 16th as the option and then let us know.
I think that was a
Yeah,
motion
well,
earlier.
that's my
ish.
suggestion. I can make a motion if that's
All
Mr.
right,
Yang,
so
the appropriate way to do it.
Do we have known absences for the 16th at this point? No known absences. All right. Let's go for it.
All right. So,
Okay.
so
Done.
we need a vote.
And is a 5 o'clock start time acceptable?
Sure. I'm happy to put it to a vote if everybody thinks we need that, but
Mr. Yang, do we need a vote on that?
nah.
No, we don't.
Okay, 16th instead of the 9th. Other comments? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
We are still on TV for 10 seconds, for a smooth transition. So, yeah, be careful.
Can you set up that meeting date in Minute Track so I can move those? Yeah. Because we have to let the applicants know or whatever.